I was studying at the library when she walked by. She had a peculiar kind of beauty, like a sea storm. She had caramel brown skin, raven black waves of hair reaching her waist, huge doe eyes, and Cupid's bow lips. She was wearing a red silk dress that showed off an hourglass figure, and oh, she was taller than me. I couldn't help but gaze at her, and thank goodness she didn't see me. She was blinking back tears, and tried to toss a little black notebook into the trash. She missed, and it landed on the marble white floor. With a thud, some other students looked up, raised their eyebrows in either fascination or annoyance, and went back to studying. She didn't seem to care. She rolled her eyes and stormed off. I don't know what tempted me to pick that book up. Curiosity, envy. I was not nearly as remarkable looking. I had brown hair, brown eyes, ghostly pale, flat as a board, and didn't know a thing about fashion. Subconsciously, maybe I envied her. I stuffed it in my bag and only looked at it when I got home. I know it's very intrusive to look through a stranger's things, especially when she seemed to be going through something. However, curiosity possessed me like a demon, and the first thing I did when I got home was plop myself on the couch, unzip my bag, and open the notebook. There was only one sentence written in it the first day I checked. I want to die. Screw everything. We should book a therapy sesh. My stomach dropped. I shut my eyes. I had stumbled on something that she clearly did not want someone to see. I was being exploitative and treating her like a freak show. Guilt overtook me like a tsunami. I shut the book and placed it in my dresser. I wasn't sure what to do with it. At lectures, I couldn't pay attention. Her words echoed in my head. The image of her blinking back tears and storming off demanded my attention. Gradually, curiosity overshadowed my guilt, and I pried it open. My jaw dropped, and my hands began to tremble. There was no way this was possible. New words were on the page. A whole essay actually, in the exact same cursive too. It was her writing. Here is what she wrote. I woke up in a cathedral, not the modest one where I begged God to reveal himself. This cathedral was skeletal, with huge curved pillars reaching up to the skies and arching, as if they wanted to trap me within. The ceiling was pitch black, devoid of the expressive, complex paintings one would expect in a cathedral, as if someone had come in the middle of the night and snatched them away. It was perfectly round too, which struck me as strange. I was also beginning to notice that the whole thing was contorted, as if someone took a cathedral and twisted the whole thing. It had stained glass paintings that were shattered to the point that the faces on them were no longer identifiable. It didn't seem like a crude job, like the glass a robber leaves behind. It felt deliberate. The faces of the figures shattered more than the rest of the body, as if someone had spent hours painstakingly ruining them. I was most certainly not in heaven. The tabernacle was missing. No Bible. However, there was a crucifix. There he was, Jesus alone, throwing his head back and laughing. If the Pope saw this, he would have a heart attack. Hell, Jesus's grin was impossibly wide, barely fitting on a human face. What was startling was that he looked like an actual human, suspended in time. Under him were two Roman soldiers, who I suppose were going to take him off the cross. Their faces were Picasso-like, one side of their face drooping like candle wax, and the other was starting to rise upwards. Their features had all melted, like they were in a wax painting, and their bodies looked stony and geometrical, like a Picasso painting. I glanced at the floor instinctively. I was so caught up in my surroundings, I had not even realized that my body was still my own. I was still wearing the same dress I wore when I threw myself off a balcony. Was this a coma, a bad dream, a message? I glanced at the pews and immediately wished I hadn't. I could see hundreds of staring right at me. They were not statues or pictures. They were made of flesh. They were all wearing the same golden mini dress that I was wearing. They all had my caramel skin and big dark eyes. They had my broad shoulders, were tall, and had my hooked nose. I was nauseous at how ugly they were, and worse, their expressions. In one row, they were all smiling, content, like Buddhist monks. I wanted to laugh. On alternating rows, I saw wide, dead eyes, a reddish inflamed face. That was what I looked like when I was utterly alone in the dead of night, where the only sound was that of muddled sobs, and I'm shocked that it is me crying. I wanted to admire the detail that went into making a personalized hell. Someone had watched all my worst moments and had decided to paint a picture with them. This place was like a gift that a stalker leaves. A sort of, you must take this, you must recognize my presence as I recognize yours, and I deem you to be worthless. I could resonate with the age-old scripture. My God, why have you forsaken me? Though I was not Jesus, the perfect man, I knew I deserved to be here, and not just because I had ended my life. I was a sparkly narcissist. Where else would I belong? I had realized that there has to be something wrong with God for creating me. He knew I would be evil, that I would be doomed to hell, and created me anyways. What kind of a God was this? Certainly not a good, loving one. I closed my eyes trying to drown out their laughs, which were becoming increasingly distorted. The tone was impossibly shrill. Their wails, on the other hand, sounded cultish, and a rhythm to them, like an ambulance blaring. A scream clawed its way out of my mouth, and I watched with terror. I tried to close my mouth, but it was frozen in that position, and saliva was beginning to well up at the bottom of my throat. I tried to drown them out, but it didn't work. We all screeched in perfect unison, as if we were part of the choir for some sick soap opera. It was almost elegant, the order to it. I dropped to the floor, sick of standing, and tried to distract myself with good memories. When I was 13, I had a little baby budgie. She had soft, blue feathers, and her name was Snowy because she was blue, and that reminded me of the winter. She was smaller than my hands, and she was impossibly cute. She looked like those little stuffed keychains you could buy at carnivals. Her eyes were like a teddy bear's, huge pupils, and a small green ring on the outside. I loved to poke at her to annoy her. I closed my eyes and pictured my pet bird for some time. I tried to drown out their screeches with her memory, but my thoughts themselves seemed to be like a storm. I was plagued with intrusive images of my corpse, twisted into an obscure angle on the ground. I was forced back into reality. Hell wanted to be seen. It was fascinating how evil had a fundamental quality everywhere you looked. I used to live in Toronto, and when I was on the TTC, the drug addicts, in all their disastrousness, wanted to be seen. They would scream at you, yell slut, bitch, whore. They weren't terribly creative, and often they would get mad at you if you ignore them. These demons demanded my attention too, and I could no longer ignore their screams. I opened my eyes, yet started at the floor. I was in denial. Perhaps I was in a coma of some kind. Maybe this was all just a figment of my imagination. After all, it did look dreamlike. Though there was a minimal chance of this, odds are I was dead. It was getting worse. The cathedral was contorting itself. Not like an earthquake, where it's all chaos. The whole thing was twisting, the way you would twist Play-Doh until it snapped. The way the rides at a carnival would. How they'd twist so much that you would fear they would break. I just stared as the giant pillars slowly became more curved, as the pitch-black ceiling got close to me. What was especially disturbing was that my doppelgangers had stopped screaming and were staring at me expectantly to see what to do. I had realized that I had stopped screaming as well and had regained control of my mouth. I wiped off the drool and stared back. Instinct then consumed me, and I glanced around the falling cathedral to find an exit, a door that leads somewhere else. There was absolutely nothing in sight. I could not hide in the pews. I could not distract myself. Hell demands a witness. I decided to just lie on the floor and get pummeled. I think this must have been what Marie Antoinette felt when she was faced with death. She accepted her fate and apologized for stepping on her executioner's shoes. The floor felt cool and they were silent. I tried to think of something beautiful, something I missed. I missed the beach. I hadn't been in more than a decade, but the memory was still etched into me. I pictured the warmth of the water and the cerulean blue of the waves. I pictured the starfish I held in my hand, and how when the water gently caressed it, its little tentacles, with thousands of little feet. I don't know the name, but they looked like little hairs. When I was 7, I was fascinated by that. I should have gone to the beach before I died. I could hear bits of the ceiling crash onto the ground, thuds, squelching noises. The ground under me was starting to shake, and I curled up tighter. I tried to ignore the cool liquid that seemed to be pulling up my legs. You can't die in the afterlife. It's not that bad. You can't die again in the afterlife. Just think of something else that has always worked. When I was alive, I would stare at my phone or my laptop, or scroll through Instagram, as if that's all there was, just so I wouldn't notice the hours pass by, so that I wouldn't notice my life pass by. Though back then, I had a choice. That's what I didn't realize, that I was the agent in my suffering. Hell jerked me back into reality. I had noticed that everything was frozen all of a sudden, as if time had stopped. Suddenly, everything began to revert to its original position, as if someone was rewinding what happened, as if time was powerless and had never gone forward. The building untwisted itself in a matter of seconds, and bloody doppelgangers, with their heads strewn around the place like decorations after a child's birthday party, went back to their rightful positions. Everything was precisely as it once was. This lasted only for a moment though. The doppelgangers kept staring at me, and soon started to make single file lines, slowly moving towards me. Like an animal, I acted on instinct, and I ran around in circles while they chased me. There was no way I could win. Logically, I knew that I was stuck here forever, that running could not do anything, that I was fundamentally doomed. But still, survival instinct propelled me, like it did for so long. There were several times I had tried to jump before, but my animalistic survival instinct had flooded my senses with a fear that was irrational, a fear that stemmed from some primal hope that was deep-rooted within me. I used my voice to chant. As I ran around in circles, in perfect unison, they chanted, "You are nothing." It was almost melodic. I ran faster, they chanted faster, almost as if to match my pace. I could hear the sound of my heart beating, and my footsteps. Their running was perfect and silent. My mouth was starting to dry, the room was beginning to spin, and my legs were starting to ache. I fell to the floor again. I tried to think of something else, anything else. I tried to think of heaven. What was heaven like? Soon, I could feel their hands on me. It felt like ice in the middle of winter. I could never stand winter. I remember once, I had gone with friends to a Christmas market. I remember vaguely being aware of their voices and their expressions, as if I was watching a movie. How animated they were, completely and utterly unbothered by the cold, whereas I could only think of one thing, that it was freezing. Perhaps I was just weak then, unable to withstand the same difficulty that others were. Maybe other people would be fine if their icy doppelgangers touched them and wouldn't have screamed like I did, like an animal caught in a trap. What was odd was that when they touched me, they melted, yet the liquid nonsensically became cooler as it melted. It must have been a sight for whoever was watching, as I screamed hysterically while being surrounded by a sludge of lookalikes. It was sticky. That was the worst part, how I felt that the sludge would stay with me irrespective of time, that I was permanently tarnished, that there was no way to escape, that I would stay here for all eternity in doppelganger sludge. It solidified around me and I just let it. I wondered who was watching. I wondered what they thought. Were they laughing? What did God think? Was he laughing? Was there a devil? Someone crafted this place. Was it God? Was it wrong to create a personalized hell for someone even if they deserved it, or is the action evil in and of itself? Why create someone if you knew they would be evil? There was no point to me. I was a waste like this Gothic cathedral. Was that the message that he was trying to send me? What was the message? That I was nothing without him? That a Gothic cathedral is nothing without him? I was so lost in thought I almost didn't notice a small light in my peripheral vision. It was so unremarkable, like the light from a dollar store flashlight. It looked so out of place in the stunning cathedral. I watched as it slowly made its way towards me. I touched it, and it burned. I jerked my hand back and it was gone. What was that? It was comforting in some way. Was I so gross that I extinguished everything I touched? Do I repel goodness? I closed my eyes. I felt so odd. My body was freezing, except for my burned hand. I then noticed something peculiar. The sludge seemed to repel my burned hand, like how magnets repel each other. I was free from the sludge, and my hand was slightly red. I propped myself against a wall and closed my eyes. I was so exhausted, and felt nothing except for the mild burning in my hand. I could feel a sense of calm rush over me, a sense of exhaustion that seemed to be an escape. I closed my eyes. She was dead. Should I have said something that day? Should I have followed her? Guilt felt like an elephant sitting on my chest. I was disgusting for this, like a rat, or mold growing on old food. Maybe I could rescue her, do something to bring her back, to help her. So Reddit, what do I do?